Hello all, it's Chris Cannon here from M2MMA, and today I'm here with a very special guest, Barney Davies from the Concussion Journey. Lovely to meet you, mate. Please tell me a little bit more about yourself, and of course that title, The Concussion Journey, and where did that come from?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, thanks for having me, first of all. I'm really excited to be on here. A chance to sort of share a bit more about my story, but also get connected with a really impressive brand um, and business such as yourselves. So, yeah, thanks for having me. The concussion journey started because I used to play a lot of rugby, managed to sort of get semi-professional level and wanted to go much further. I unfortunately sustained a number of concussions within a short space of time and ignored symptoms, thought I was going to get through it. And, like most rugby players or most people in contact sports, just got on with it and thought the symptoms would go away. They didn't. And I managed to get knocked out within the space of 6 weeks, probably knocked out two or three times. So, yeah, that caught up with me. And then I ended up going through this battle of trying to recover from symptoms of post-concussion syndrome for, I mean, realistically, it was probably a good 2 year process before I got back to being fully normal myself now. And in that process, I learnt a hell of a lot around concussion and post-concussion syndrome and how to recover. And I thought there must be other people suffering out there like I was and like I am at that point. And so I wanted to share my journey, hence the journey part of the name, and just spread awareness. I wanted to stop people making the mistakes that I'd made, especially rugby players, because I love that sport. And I didn't want to see people make the same mistake and retire at the age of 23 like I had to, when I had so much more rugby to play and so much more to give to the sport and so much more to achieve in my own head, my own eyes. And yeah, it was just such a shame for me. So I didn't want people to have to go through that. And then in that process of making this page on Instagram, I got a lot of outreach from people that were suffering, and I realized that maybe I should try and help people recover from their post concussion syndrome and their concussions as well. And yeah, now I have a business around it. I help individual clients on a one-to-one basis get through their symptoms, get them back to normal, get them dealing with their symptoms, and sort of guide them through the process. It's quite difficult to find the right people and the right help online, and neurologists can be quite obviously brilliant and very intelligent people, but they can focus on one area and rather than looking at it holistically, and you can get sort of pigeonholed down one area. So I try and guide people to the right people and give them the holistic approach rather than a pigeonholed approach, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's the concussion journey. That's where I'm at now, and looking just to grow and help as many people as I possibly can.
That's an amazing story, mate, and I'm sure I speak for many of us out there. We appreciate the work you're doing, and obviously I came across you through Instagram. We're both kind of on this mutual mission to spread awareness around this issue. So if you take me back to when you were playing rugby, when you first got concussed, did you actually realise you were concussed at the time?
Yeah, I definitely knew, and it was it's interesting because when you're in it, I think you sort of live with symptoms from quite an early age. I remember in school getting head knocks and thinking, oh, I can't really write essays as well as I used to write, or I can't really remember things as well as I used to remember things, and just sort of brushing it off and thinking that's just rugby and that's just, oh, it's fine. And looking back now, that's mental, like that's really bad. But yeah, it, you do, you get on with things. But yeah, to answer your question, I definitely knew I was concussed. I definitely knew I had some sort of brain injury and some sort of problem. I was getting migraines and dizziness, slight vision problems and stuff, but I didn't know the severity of the issue. I didn't know that that was going to be damaging me as much as it was. And I mean, if you just look at it short term, every time if you get a concussion, if you had symptoms, and then you get another concussion while still presenting symptoms or being concussed in that energy deficit, then you make your symptoms a lot harder to shake, but also, if you get hit on the head enough, we know that the brain cells end up dying and the neurons, they can't replenish themselves. So I knew I was concussed, but I didn't know the severity of the situation.
So when again, just to press you on that a little bit, when you say you knew, is that you judging that you're concussed, or did someone tell you? Did you have any support from your coaches in school?
Yeah, so I mean, if I look back to school times, I think that was sort of just the back end of the non uh, protocol era. So
Okay.
2014, 2015, that sort of time, there still wasn't much of a protocol going on in rugby, and there, especially at the grassroots. So I was playing for my college. It wasn't private. It wasn't a rugby college. It wasn't anything of the sort. So there's no funding there really. It's rock up and play at some random field against some random other college with one referee that probably doesn't really know the concussion protocols. So yeah, I remember playing in a sevens tournament. I got knocked out like spar code, but only for a few seconds. And I got up and everything was blue. Like the grass was blue, everything was it just had this
Wow.
blue filter. And I'm running across the pitch to try and follow the play, thinking, oh, I don't even know what I was thinking. Like, just I wanted to get the ball in my hands again, and there was no one stopping me. No one was there to help me, and I was definitely stumbling around. It's fairly obvious that I wasn't right. Whether or not it was obvious I'd taken a bang to the head or not, but um, I then had symptoms for the rest of the day. I mean, look, again, this is like looking back. I just had no idea at the time how bad it was, but
Mm.
looking back, yeah, I was definitely concussed, and no one was stopping me. I remember also one time I was at a training session at my club, my childhood club, and I took the ball into contact in this drill, and someone's shoulder tackled me very high. It was like a rugby league style tackle. This guy's shoulders just connected with my chin, and I've dropped the ball, stumbled, and I've just like fallen over into my coach's arms effectively, unable to keep myself on my feet. And he sort of just laughed, pat me on the back, throw me back into the drill. And it's like, that was when I was probably 14, I reckon, 14 years old. So again, it was sort of pre concussion protocol era, and coaches were just unaware. I don't blame them. I don't blame anyone in and around my club. It's the RFU really, and yeah, the lack of research and the lack of awareness around the issue. But yeah, plenty of times I had concussions and just flew under the radars playing either that day or playing the following week at the age of 14, 15 when my brain's developing probably arguably the most. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that speaks to one of the issues. I think a lot of people are concerned about is youth sports, right? And I think that's we look at the professional side of things of where M2MMA is placed, for example. You mentioned World Rugby, but youth sports and protecting young athletes developing, especially around their brain health, is vital. Have you seen much change, or do you know of much change in terms of education in youth sports these days?
Yeah, certainly within the sport that I've been involved in the most, obviously rugby, and they've made huge steps in trying to promote awareness, but also protect players. And I saw that. I was a coach last year at the school, and the protocols are much better. There's always a physio, there's always a paramedic, there's always someone on site ready to deal with any sort of situation that arises with any injury, but also, yeah, concussion involved in that as well. So they've taken big steps, and I remember having concussion talks at university. Funnily enough, I ignored them. So whether or not they work or not for a 21-year-old trying to go professional with rugby, I don't know. But they're taking the steps. They're trying to promote the awareness in the game, and there's law changes within the game now. So the tackle heights change. You have to tackle below the chest. They've done a huge amount around the ruck and the breakdown, which is a massive problem within rugby union, especially. Obviously, in rugby league, you don't have the breakdown, but yeah, that's where a lot of head injuries happen, and they've made some big changes there. So they're trying to make movements. Whether or not it's quick enough, that's debatable, and that's it's a tough one because you don't want to drive people away from the sport, and you don't want to. A big thing that I think the RFU see as a problem is shedding light on concussion and the real dangers of concussion, and basically just driving all these parents away from the sport and not letting their kid play the sport. And if we don't let kids play the sport, they're going to start later. If they do start, they start later, so the skill development's going to be later. So then we'll get blown out of the water by these countries like South Africa and New Zealand that probably don't really care about concussion protocols and just throw their kids in, and they're unbelievably good at rugby. So I think there's big changes happening. It's just very slow, but that's like anything. It's always slow, and unfortunately that's the way it is. But yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of interesting talking points there. Firstly, you referenced yourself as a 21-year-old wanting to make it pro, going to concussion talks in university, and not wanting to pay attention. Now, from the other side of things, how would you, let's say, if you could speak to that 21-year-old now, going to that talk, how would you reframe it to try and get that individual to listen to that talk?
It's really difficult because I know what he was thinking at that point, and that was just like, I often refer to rugby as my one true love, right? Like, it's the thing that to this day I've not got the same amount of joy out of anything apart from now actually helping people. Like, I get a similar buzz, but it's taken so long to find that. But yeah, so I talking to him, it's very difficult to change someone's mind around that and give them anything that's going to block them potentially playing the thing that they love. Like, and trying to convince an individual like that is very difficult, but I think it's giving them a bit of perspective, and that's what I've gotten now. I've realised that there is more to life than rugby. There's more to life than that sport, and that's not necessarily meaning you have to give up rugby and stop playing. It's just realise that the main thing is, if you take time out for a head knock, it doesn't mean that you're going to stop playing the sport entirely. It doesn't mean you're going to miss out on opportunities. Opportunities come all the time within sport. It's just being prepped and ready as ready as you can at that opportunity. And part of that is looking after the longevity of your brain. If you push through these symptoms and you keep getting knocked on the head while you're still suffering with symptoms, you're going to be more susceptible every time you get hit on the head. So therefore, it doesn't matter how hard you push through these symptoms and how hard you push through to get through to this next opportunity and not, miss out on this selection process, this next trial. If your brain isn't able to cope with getting hit on the head anymore, you're not going to be able to get past that trial anyway. You're going to have to retire at some point. So yeah, I guess trying to send that message to someone, but in a way that they hear it, and that's very difficult because it's very easy to have these blinkers on, and you quite often people just don't even hear it. They just don't want to hear it because they think, well, it's not going to be me. The likelihood of it being me, and it's very easy to keep your head down. But I mean, on that note, like, I've had countless people message me now on Instagram saying that they're in the same position as I am, and they're 21, 22, 23, early 20s, and they're trying to go professional in rugby, and I'm having to have these conversations with people like similar to this, and yeah, these are grown men and women crying over the other end of the laptop because they've had to retire at the age of whatever they are, and that's that's heartbreaking. So I think it's tough because I think you have to see it to believe it. I think you have to have someone you know go through that experience potentially to really believe it. Or I don't know, if someone says the right thing at the right time, maybe it hits home. But that's the battle. I think is just trying to give that person perspective and give that person the understanding that if you don't make the right decisions now, then yeah, you won't be able to play the sport at all, let alone push further on. So yeah, I hope that sort of answers the question. It's quite long-winded.
No, again, it does, because this is one of the real issues that we all have to address. Working in this space now, is that you were an athlete, I was in a very different sport, but I understand the idea that is your sole focus. It's the thing you love the most. To have someone come and tell you need to pull back or step back because of this potential health issue, especially when your professional career is on the line, as you mentioned, opportunities as well, and also the nature of these sports. You talk about rugby and combat sports, where toughness and pushing through things when you're down is a very much an integral part of that mentality. We need to have these conversations about how do we reframe these things. And for me, as you mentioned there very rightly, it's about an athlete understanding if you protect your brain health and manage it properly, you are going to actually improve your performance and get better results over time. You'll be able to play or compete in the sport you love over a longer period and be more successful. And I think that's the only way to frame it to an athlete so they can understand it, because ultimately that's their goal, is to be successful and win and play the sport they love. So I think you framed it really well there.
Yeah, I mean it's difficult, as you say. I think something that I didn't even mention is that the career that you get. So something I've had to deal with from the fallout of giving up rugby is, I had this sort of 5-year plan ish in my head that was, if I didn't make a professional contract in the UK, I was going to go to Australia or South Africa or even America or somewhere to go and play rugby. And in doing that, I get to travel, and it would probably be paid for by the club I was going to go and play for. So effectively getting a free travel, maybe even paid for travel, to go and experience the world in a different way. You're automatically going to have potentially 50 or 60 mates at whatever rugby club you're at and wherever you are in the world. And if I played until sort of 35, I could, it would probably be a bit detrimental on my relationships and stuff. But if I could travel for that long, I probably would travel for that long and just travel the world playing rugby. And that's part of the fallout of having to give up, is that I've no longer got that plan, and that would have been a really cool way to spend my 20s and early 30s, and that's just gone now. I don't have that same opportunity, and I mean it's a small thing, and it's a very first world problem, but it's something that has massively affected me. I'm now sort of having to start again, and that's what I've spent the last 3 years of my life doing, is trying to pick up the pieces and work out, right, what the hell can I do now? What skills have I got from rugby and my very generic degree from university, which I went and did just to carry on playing rugby, and actually come up with some sort of career off the back of it. And luckily enough, I've managed to sort of stumble into something that gives me a lot of joy, and it's starting to work. But that 3-year process has been, to be honest, very scary and heartbreaking at times. Like, sometimes you look back and just wish I'd made some different decisions. And there's just, I could pinpoint about 10 different points where I've been an absolute moron, but a moron it's just within that world, isn't it? You're brainwashed. And it's just, if I could go back, oh my God, if I could go back, and there's just over a 2-3 year period, about 10 times, I would have changed my decision-making process and probably would still be playing the game of rugby in some capacity. So yeah, that's a massive thing that I've missed out on. I just can't stand the thought that other people are going to be making the same mistakes as me in that regard. So.
And then that's why it's so important, you're out here telling your story. Because yes, there's one side of it we could frame to a young athlete to say, like, to monitor your brain health and to report symptoms if you are getting them of potential concussion or subconcussion. But the other side of that is to actually, unfortunately, promote the stories of like yourselves, that the very real danger, if you ignore these signs, you will end up like Barney, who has to give up the sport he loved at 22 years old or however young you were, and your career will be curtailed. And unfortunately, it's kind of the carrot and the stick scenario, but realistically, we need both to get this message out there. And then from the other side of things, on the governing standpoint, when we're talking about the organisations governing these sports, this is obviously where M2MMA comes in. In your opinion, from what you've seen, you mentioned earlier, they have made a lot of progress in rugby specifically. What do you think are the next steps from the governance side to help protect athletes in rugby?
I think something that I'm certainly very passionate about, and something that one of the initial ideas I had when I started the Instagram page was that I wanted to go into schools and do talks and explain my story and talk to kids, but talk to the parents as well. And I saw it as me being still at the time 25 years old. I'm actually quite close to the age, certainly of the 18-year-olds that are in the sixth form. And try and give them some perspectives from someone that doesn't look too dissimilar to them in terms of age, and then it might hit them a bit harder. So I think, that's one thing that can make a huge difference, is getting a bit more representation from a younger group of people. If we put together 10 or 15 lads and ladies from my sort of age group that have had to give it up, and get them to do the talks, or create some project where we all band together and put some awareness stuff together, or
Sorry, just quickly, have you spoken to the RFU or World Rugby about that at all?
I actually haven't really. I'm, to be honest, being absolutely honest, I'm at that time especially, I was very scared of having any sort of interaction with the RFU, because I didn't want them to sort of see me as a whistleblower and someone who's
It's
trying to
interesting.
damage the sport. So I was trying to sort of fly under the radar and just go at it on my own, which is probably the wrong sort of mindset to have. But I think the way to do it is, especially with kids, right? At the age of 10 or 11, getting knocked out is probably quite funny for a kid, right? You don't have any idea what's going on, and you just, especially if you saw your mate get hit on the head and they're stumbling around, falling over, that's like watching someone on the TV doing MMA or UFC. Like they got Sparkoed, and as a kid, it's like, wow, that is awesome, and it's like, right, especially as a boy, I think I'm sure you were the same growing up. It's just like, that's awesome. But like the reality of that is, especially at that young of an age where your brain is developing the way it is, that can be so detrimental to your brain development, and it can be really bad. So I think what you need to do is give the parents the knowledge and the ability to step in and look after their kids properly. And I mean, like, I speak to people at my rugby club about my situation. Whenever I go down, it was my childhood club. I spent 16 years playing there, so I know a lot of people down there, and people, I constantly having conversations, and they're like, "Oh, when are you going to come back playing?" I'm never playing again. But we'll often talk about concussions, and we'll talk about the long-term risks and stuff, and talking about CTE, and the amount of people that don't even know what CTE is would astound you. And it's like, you're involved in a contact sport that we know for a fact causes CTE if you don't look after yourself properly. And yet, like, most people don't even know what CTE is, and it's like, it's just crazy. So it's giving people the awareness, giving people the knowledge. People that play a contact sport are involved in a contact sport that can cause these issues have the right to know. Like, you cannot withhold that right from someone. You can't stop them knowing what they're doing to themselves, potentially long term. And that's the travesty within the situation, if that's even the right word. But it's yeah, I just it's ridiculous. I think it's totally unfair, and I think there's people turning a blind eye, if being honest.
Well, you mentioned it earlier in regards to, again, the governing bodies and trying to strike that balance between not turning young kids away from playing the sports. And that is a real issue. And like, I get it. And it's the same when people ask me about combat sports, and you don't want to scare people away from these incredible, martial arts and the benefits of playing sports like rugby and so on. So again, it's up to people like us, like you and I having these conversations today, to find out what is the right balance. And for me, it's like, these sports are incredible. Go participate in them. But as you said, have the right knowledge and information in terms of how to do them in the safest way possible. And that, to me, is where the big gap that we need to close.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And was something that sort of triggered my thinking the other day about MMA and UFC and stuff was I've been speaking to a client over in America, and she's had a few head knocks from MMA, and we were speaking about sparring, and what triggered this conversation was the conversation we had last week or the week before about sparring and how many head knocks you get in sparring and how ridiculous sparring is. So I asked her how many times she gets hit on the head on average when she spars, that she thinks, and she said maybe 20 times every sparring session, right? Which is, I thought, might be quite a lot, but I don't really know.
It's probably, well, in MMA, maybe, but it's probably quite low, actually, I would say.
Right, okay, so there we are. Yeah, and so I then asked, well, how many times are you sparring a week? She said, well, 3 times a week. And so I then, okay, so you're getting hit on the head 60 times a week, every week of the year. So what, 55 times 60, whatever that is. And then over a 10-year career, those numbers are adding up quick. And that amount of head knocks, that is exactly, those light impacts over time is exactly what causes CTE. We know that's
And
exactly
then,
what
and
CTE
I can
is.
tell you, if you look at boxing, you can probably double or triple those, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And again, when we first met and had our initial conversation, what I mentioned to you, one of the big gaps that we see that we need to address at M2MMA is around training protocols and specifically sparring. Because as you mentioned there, the reality, if you to add up all the head knocks an combat sports athlete takes, and probably in rugby similarly, over a year, the majority are in training. And yet
yeah,
no one is monitoring training, right? Nowadays we have the rules, and, in rugby you've got certain protocols, you said improved protocols in the actual games, and same in combat sports. But the real issue is in training. And again, this is where we see M2MMA coming, is actually providing athletes with real-time data to actually start to understand what is happening to their brain when they're participating in sparring, and actually how to, again, we're not saying take sparring away, because we know it's an integral part of the sport, but can we give athletes the information to find the right balance for performance / protecting their brain health? Because at the moment, it's all done on subjective guesswork based over experience from knowledgeable coaches, but they need better tools. And I would say the same in rugby. I just think this is the issue, the blind spot we seem to have. And obviously we had this issue in the NRL recently with Eli Katoa,
yeah.
suffering, apparently, got knocked out in the warm-up, but no one realised or no one reported it. And it's staggering that that's still going on.
I mean, that case is just crazy. I mean, you look at his face; it's just mashed to pieces before he's even started the game. It's like, how on earth has he been allowed to go and play? It's,
No, it's
oh man, that's crazy. But I mean, the one thing that's happened within rugby is there's rules around how much contact you're allowed to do in a week. So I think it's total 100 minutes.
Okay.
Or 120 maybe, something like that. So basically, if you play 80 minutes on the weekend, you're only allowed to then do 20 minutes of contact during the week. So they've limited it in that way. But one thing I was trying to explain to my client during the week about sparring, eventually when she goes back to MMA, which I really hope she does, because I don't think she's the sort of case that's having to retire. I said, look, like, let's manage your workload, and let's think about maybe sparring once. I'd say spar once every other week, but that's me as a non-fight. I have no idea what I'm talking about with fighting. But I was trying to match it up to how I would prep for rugby, and you can't replace, for example, in rugby, that there's nothing you can do that's going to be exactly the same as making 20 tackles during the week to practice tackling. Like, the act of tackling someone is going to be the best way to practice tackling. But there's some pretty close seconds that don't involve actually hitting someone and risking those glancing blows to your head, or even the body shot that still makes that rapid deceleration of the brain, causing concussion. And there's plenty you can do that's still going to replicate tackling with muscle memory. That means that it's not going to affect your performance on a Saturday, and it might even be better doing like a slowed down version of a tackle that then causes your muscles to actually think more and create that muscle memory, and then you're even safer then on a Saturday playing because you've got better muscle memory, better drills, and you're just risking your head less during the week as well. And I thought there must be a way of doing that with sparring that just involves not hitting your head repeatedly during the week. There has to be a way.
Well, it's interesting. A few years ago, Max Holloway, multiple UFC champion, one of the legends of the sport, he came out after one of probably the most impressive performances I think I've seen. I think he knocked up over 600 strikes. I think it was against Calvin Kattar. Please forgive me if my memory's wrong. But he came out and said, I think even on the Joe Rogan show or even in the interview afterwards, again, I'm just trying to draw my mind back, he'd stopped sparring, right? And he felt like that elevated his performance because he was sharper and fresher and he saw things clearer. And he mentioned about, guys, you've got to protect your brain. And it's a really interesting point. And it goes back to the issue that no one really knows. And that's, again, where we see technology should be implemented in training camps to at least start to collect the data to understand where everyone's best or minimum effective dose is, not, again, to protect, but it's also to perform. Because you could be better with less sparring. But at the moment, no one knows. And it's based off experience and the way things have always been done. And it's good to hear, again, that rugby, they do seem to be at the forefront of introducing improved protocols around these issues. And combat sports is definitely behind. And that's why it's great to speak to people like yourselves to see how we can also learn from other sports. And that's something we're also doing at M2MMA, is to study other sports to see where we can take those lessons and implement them in combat sports. But you also mentioned, I think, a really important thing, again, a number of times, is the mindset that we also need to address.
Yeah.
And that goes back to your friend there, your client, sorry. Let's figure out, let's use data, let's look at things a different way to improve your performance, to get better results, to lengthen your career, to make more money. It's not just about protecting yourself, but it's actually to be a better athlete as well as being a healthier individual.
Yeah, and there's so many ways you can do that, and I just think it's exactly like you've just said. It's longevity. How long do you want to be playing this sport? How long do you want to be doing the thing you absolutely love doing? Do you want to be the guy or the girl that is retiring on their terms at the age of whatever, like 35? Most people retire at rugby like around that age. Or do you want to be the guy that's forced, or the girl that's forced to retire at the age of 21, 22? And that's such a reality. But how do you get that message out there? How do you convince people? And I feel like it's from my experience, actually talking to someone one to one, I can get that message through to them. I can sit there and I can give them comparisons from my life to their life. Tell them, right, this is where it happened for me. Have you experienced something similar to that? And they're like, oh shit, yeah, that's kind of like me. You know, I've been in that situation. Sorry, didn't mean to swear, but yeah, it's when you're one to one. I think you can have that personal connection with someone. You can draw on their experiences and match it to yours. But yeah, when you're talking to a mass audience, it's very difficult to get that message across, isn't it? And that's the battle that we're both fighting at the moment, and it's a tough one.
And I'll tell you also why having someone like yourself doing what you're doing and being available for athletes to go speak to is so important. Because, again, if I take it specifically to combat sports, a lot of athletes will be scared to report symptoms. Because of the nature of the sport, and fights are often few and far between, athletes need the money, and also promoters don't want to know. They don't want to call off their main event that they've sold tickets on. So we've got this issue where at the moment athletes and promoters are disincentivized to report symptoms like this. So again, sometimes athletes might even be scared to go to their coach. They might be scared to go to the promoter. So again, having someone like yourself they perhaps could reach out to could be really important. And again, if you could just remind you again, how can people contact you?
Yeah, so my main concussion, well, my main thing is Instagram. So the underscore concussion underscore journey is my name on Instagram. I try and share as much on there as I possibly can. I'm also on TikTok under the exact same name. I'm branching out to LinkedIn hopefully soon enough, and then building a website as well. So hopefully within the next sort of month or two, I'll have a website up and people can find me on there. But yeah, just on the mindset around concussion, and it's ingrained from a young age, certainly in rugby, and I'm sure it's exactly the same in MMA and boxing and all these contact sports. But it's ingrained in you to fight through pain, fight through injury. If you were to come off the field for an injury in rugby, you are seen as soft, and that is just fact. I still look at people watching rugby, and if someone goes down with a shoulder or something and they come off the field, I naturally will think, are they really that hurt? And it's like, even after what's happened to me, and it's the same with every injury. Like, it's not just your brain that is going to be affected after playing 15, 20 years in a contact sport. It's other things as well, and that's a whole nother argument. But at least I suppose with a shoulder or a knee, you're not gonna your life's not affected in the same way as your brain, and those things can recover over time, and you can have a knee replacement or you can have a shoulder replacement, but you can't have a brain replacement, unfortunately. So yeah, the point is it's ingrained in you from such a young age. So it's like, it's like anything. You learn your most when you're a kid, and your personality is built from when you're a kid, and it's very hard to then change that as you get older. It's, as I'm sure with anyone who's been to therapy or had these deep conversations, changing things from your past is very difficult, and it's, old habits die hard. So trying to convince someone to change their mindset around fighting through pain and therefore fighting through concussion symptoms is very difficult. It just comes naturally, and in that moment, especially when you're on the field, you're blowing out your backside and your lungs are on the floor, and you're not thinking too clearly, and all you're wanting to do is see out that game for your mates, for your family, potentially watching on the sideline, for all those supporters that are watching, or for whatever the reason you do it for, in that moment. And you've got 10 minutes left, and it's like, it's 28 all, and you're trying to score that try to win the game, and it's just all or nothing. Are you going to come off the field? If it was me, Never, never would, because you don't want to. You can't do that, can you? So it's changing that mindset. But I don't know. That then goes into the debate of why are we playing these sports? Why do we do it? And are you willing to sort of take that risk? Are you willing to potentially give up and give up your health for that moment of glory? And yeah, I mean, I've got plenty of mates that are still playing now, and they've got genuine brain issues. They've got symptoms that they deal with day to day. So that's the toughest thing. It's changing that mindset, and I think the best way to do that is give people all of the information. Like, you have to give, even in rugby, like, there's still people are still unaware. Like I mentioned that at the rugby club, people not knowing about CTE and stuff. You've got to give everyone all of the knowledge, every single nasty detail around concussion, like everything. So then they have the power themselves to make the decision. And then when they are, lungs on the floor, absolutely dying in that moment, and they take a big knock to the head, they go, okay, maybe it's not worth this moment of glory, and maybe my side can do this without me. And even if they don't win, I know I've made the right decision to take myself off the field.
Yeah, I would. It's some great points there, Barney. There's two things I would say on that. Going out on your shield, which is a very famous term coined in MMA or boxing, will always be glorified. But you know what's glorified more? Winning. Right? So again, think about the long term, think about your performance, and that should always be prioritized. Secondly, again, what can we do as, talk about now, organizations or people who work on this issue? It's about giving athletes the best tools and information, as you rightly said, available, to make sure that when it comes down to that 75th minute in the 28 or the final round, when you're standing there swinging, that athlete's brain is in the best possible position it can be to take those shots. So again, like, those are the two things I would say, and from there, I think we can do a better job in this space. It is the way the sports are. It's why we love them, right? It's simple as that. I mean, I love playing rugby until I hurt my knee, and I love watching combat sports. And there's nothing like two guys swinging in the final round, or girls. But we can definitely put them in a better position, and we can definitely put better education out there. And again, I appreciate this chat again today, Barney, and let's keep in touch, and I think we can do some good work together in terms of spreading the word here.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. It's been a pleasure, and yeah, it's a big old battle we're fighting, and it's mostly uphill. But yeah, with some brilliant people trying to fight that battle with us, I'm sure we'll get there. And hopefully,
100%.
Yeah, hopefully change the sports for the better and stop people retiring at the age of 23. Hopefully as well.
Definitely. I agree. Again, and we appreciate you telling your story, mate. And again, once again, anyone who wants to reach out with Barney and you're going to hear from him personally or discuss with him personally how they could potentially help, on their journey from, concussion and so on, please reach out to him. Cheers, mate.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Chris. Cheers.
Cheers, bye.